The text came in at 6:52 on a Tuesday morning while I was parallel parking on the third attempt outside a federal building in Atlanta. I had a deposition at 9, a call with a partner at 11, and a printed binder of financial records in my back seat that I had been cross-referencing since Sunday. My phone was face up on the passenger seat. I saw the preview before I'd even cut the engine. It was from my sister-in-law. The message read, "Just so you know, we already moved everything out. Brendan said you'd make this complicated, so we didn't give you the chance. Good luck figuring out the rest." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down, finished parking, picked up my binder, and walked into the building. I had a deposition to give. The message would still be there in 2 hours, and so would everything I had already put in place. My name is Serena Voss. I'm 31 years old and I work as a forensic accountant in a mid-size litigation support firm in Atlanta. What that means, in plain terms, is that attorneys hire me to find where money went when someone is claiming it went nowhere. I reconstruct financial timelines. I find transfers that were meant to look accidental. I read bank records the way other people read novels, looking for the moment the story stops making sense. I have been doing this since I was 25. I am good at it. My husband Brendan knew that when he married me. He had watched me work. He had sat across from me at the kitchen table on late nights when I was building a case for a client, and he had said more than once, "I would never want to be on your bad side." He said it like a joke. I had smiled like it was one. We were married for 4 years. For the first 2, it was the kind of marriage that looks good from the outside because it mostly was good from the outside. We had a house in Decatur that I had put the down payment on. We had a joint account we used for household expenses and a shared Costco membership and a running argument about whether to get a dog. He was funny in the easy way that made rooms like him. I loved him in the specific way you love someone you chose carefully. Then his sister Priya moved to Atlanta. Priya is 3 years older than Brendan, and she has the particular confidence of someone who has never been made to account for what they've cost the people around them. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a story about a difficult breakup and a sublease that had fallen through, and Brendan asked if she could stay with us for a few weeks, and I said yes because that is what you say when your husband asks you something like that. 6 weeks became 4 months. I am not going to spend time describing all the ways those 4 months wore on me. What I will say is that by month 3 I had started keeping a log on my work laptop time-stamped. Because I am a person who documents things and because something in me had started filing away information with the specific quiet instinct I usually reserve for client cases. Small things, the way Priya would stop talking when I walked into a room. Not abruptly, but smoothly. The way people stop talking when they've practiced stopping. The way Brendan started using the phrase, "Priya thinks," the way he used to use the phrase, "I think." The way certain mail started coming to the house addressed to her. Not personal mail, mail with the return addresses of financial institutions I recognized. The moment of clarity came on a Sunday evening in February. I came home from a weekend work trip to find Brendan and Priya sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Not his laptop. Mine. The work one, which I had left closed and password protected. Brendan looked up and said he just needed to check something and thought mine was his in the dark. Priya didn't look up at all. She kept her eyes on the screen for a half-second longer than she needed to before she turned away. And in that half-second, I read her expression the way I read financial documents. Looking for the moment the story stops making sense. It stopped making sense right there. I didn't say anything. I went upstairs, closed the bathroom door, ran the tap, and stood at the sink for a few minutes with my hands flat on the counter. I was not panicking. I was doing what I do when a case reveals itself to be larger than the initial scope. I was adjusting. That night, I called my attorney. Her name is Beverly, and she has been doing family and asset law in Georgia for 22 years. I have referred clients to her. She knows how I work. When I told her what I'd observed, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "What's your timeline?" I said I didn't know yet. She said, "Then we start building one." What followed was 3 months of careful and methodical work that I did entirely in parallel with my regular life. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner. I watched television next to Brendan on the couch. I asked Priya about her job search in the tone of someone who was genuinely interested, and in the margins of all of that, I was doing what I was trained to do. Beverly connected me with a financial investigator named Stuart, who had spent 15 years doing exactly the kind of asset reconstruction I do professionally, but from the domestic side: divorce, estate disputes, hidden accounts. He reviewed 6 months of household financials in 8 days and came back with a documented pattern: small, irregular transfers out of the joint account that individually fell below the threshold that would trigger an automatic bank alert. Transfers timed to weekends or travel days, when I would be less likely to check statements in detail. 11 transactions over 4 months totaling just over $19,000, each one categorized in the transaction notes as household expenses, each one going to an account that was not a vendor I recognized. Stuart also found that someone had attempted to access my individual savings account 3 times using the correct routing number and the wrong access credentials. The attempts had auto-flagged and been locked, but they hadn't triggered a notification I would have seen without looking for them specifically. I called Beverly that night and said I needed to move fast. We spent the next 6 weeks restructuring. My individual savings account, which held the down payment recovery equity from the house, just over $140,000, was transferred to a new account at a different institution with a different login architecture. No routing connection to the joint account. Beverly helped me document the property, every piece of furniture I had purchased before the marriage, every appliance, every piece of art on the walls, all of it photographed, serial numbers logged, receipts pulled from my email archive going back 5 years. I had receipts for almost everything. I am a person who keeps receipts. I also had our home security system updated. The previous system had a shared app that Brendan had access to. The new one ran through a private account he didn't know existed. Full coverage of the front entrance, the living room, the garage interior, and both cars in the driveway. Then I waited. I had told Beverly from the beginning that I did not want to confront Brendan before I had a complete picture. Confrontation before documentation is how cases fall apart. You show your hand, the other side adjusts, and suddenly, what was recoverable is gone. I had watched it happen to clients. I was not going to let it happen to me. Beverly filed a protective motion with the court in April related to the house. This created a legal record of my ownership stake without requiring me to alert Brendan to anything he didn't know. As far as he could tell, I had been going to work, making dinner, and asking his sister about her job search for 4 months. The deposition in Atlanta that Tuesday morning was for a different client, a supply chain fraud case that had nothing to do with any of this. I am a professional. I did not let the two things touch. I walked out of the federal building at 11:15, found a bench near the parking structure, and read the text from Priya again. Just so you know, we already moved everything out. Brendan said you'd make this complicated, so we didn't give you the chance. Good luck figuring out the rest. I forwarded the screenshot to Beverly. Then I opened the security app on my phone. The footage began at 4:40 that morning. A moving truck, a mid-size rental, not a full professional crew, had pulled into the driveway while it was still dark. The timestamp was clear. The exterior light I had had installed the month before lit the driveway automatically, and the camera captured everything in clean detail. Brendan was in the footage. Priya was in the footage. 2 men I didn't recognize carried furniture through the front door for 2 hours and 40 minutes. The dining table, the couch, the bedroom dresser, the television, 3 lamps, the kitchen island stools. My grandmother's small writing desk, which I had brought from my parents' house after she died and which I had a photograph of her sitting at from 1987. They left the books. They left the pantry. They left the bed frame, which was too heavy without a third person. I watched the full footage once, and then I put my phone in my pocket and walked back to my car. Beverly had already begun the process by the time I called her. The text from Priya, sent from a phone registered in Priya's name to my cell number, constituted a written admission. Beverly's words, she basically filed the complaint herself. The security footage documented the removal in detail, with timestamps and identifiable faces and a license plate on the moving truck. Stewart's financial documentation of the transfer pattern was already a clean exhibit. Beverly filed an emergency motion with the county court that afternoon, attached Priya's text and the security footage, and requested an immediate freeze on any assets that could be connected to the joint account transfers. She also called the property manager of the furnished rental in Savannah. Brendan had told me in March that he was thinking about a consulting trip to Savannah, which I'd understood to be neither a consulting trip nor a coincidence, and confirmed that Brendan and Priya had signed a 3-month lease that started 2 weeks prior. The property manager, when Beverly explained she was acting as legal counsel in an ongoing civil proceeding involving property removed from a documented marital residence, was cooperative. Beverly's words, "They never want to be in the middle of it." I drove back to Decatur that evening. It took me 2.5 hours in traffic, and I listened to a podcast about municipal water infrastructure the whole way, because I needed to hear someone talk about something that had nothing to do with any of this. I unlocked the door at 6:48. The house was not empty. The way an abandoned house is empty. It was empty the way a place is empty when someone has taken only the things that looked expensive and left everything else exactly where it was. The walls had rectangles of slightly less faded paint where the frames had hung. The kitchen had my coffee maker and my spice rack and nothing to sit on. The living room had the rug, which was mine, documented, purchased in 2020, and no furniture to put on it. My grandmother's writing desk was gone. I stood in the middle of the living room for a while. I want to be honest about that. I am a person who is trained to stay organized in the middle of chaos, and I stayed organized, but I stood there for a while first. I thought about the Tuesday nights Brendan and I had spent in that living room with takeout and bad television, and the easy assumption that the person next to you is who they appear to be. I thought about how long I had been watching and waiting and saying nothing, and how the fact that I had been right about all of it was not a thing that felt good. Then I put on the latex gloves Beverly had told me to keep in my purse and photographed every room. Brendan called at 9:11. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:43. The third call came at 10:05 and I answered it. He didn't say hello. He said, "The account is frozen, Serena. What did you do?" I said, "What account?" He said, "You know what account, the joint account, there's a legal hold on it." I said, "That account has a legal hold because money was transferred out of it without my authorization 11 times over 4 months. Stewart documented all of it. Beverly filed this afternoon." There was a pause. "Then, that money was for household expenses," I said. "I have the transaction records. Those transfers didn't go to any household vendor. Beverly has all of it as exhibit material." Another pause, longer. Then his voice shifted into something harder. "You were watching us." I said I was protecting myself. "That's not the same thing." Priya took the phone. I could hear the ocean or a highway, something with distance in it. She said, "You need to unfreeze that account. We have expenses here." I said, "I'm not sure why you're telling me this." She said, "Brendan is your husband." I said, "Brendan is the person who was in my driveway at 4:40 this morning taking furniture out of a house he does not own, which is now documented on security footage that Beverly has already submitted to the court. You sent me a text at 6:52 this morning describing what you'd done. That text is Exhibit A." She said that was a private message. I said it came to my cell phone from yours. "Beverly sends her regards." I want to be precise about the moment after that, because I have told this story to a few people since and they always ask if I felt angry. The answer is that I felt clear. Not relieved, not triumphant. Just clear, the way you feel at the end of a long case when the documentation finally closes and the pattern is complete and everything you suspected is exactly where you put it. Brendan sent 3 more messages that night. The first was angry. The second was explanatory in a way that was also angry. The third said, "I know you think you did the right thing." I did not respond to any of them. What followed was not fast or dramatic. Real legal processes aren't. Beverly filed the dissolution petition the following week. The house was mine. My down payment, my mortgage payments, my name on the deed, all documented. The court confirmed the protective motion I hadn't told Brendan existed. Stewart's financial exhibit was accepted as part of the record and the $19,000 in transferred funds became part of the asset calculation in the settlement. The furniture recovery took longer. About 40% of the items had already been dispersed. I found out later that Priya had been selling pieces through a Facebook Marketplace account she'd created in a name I didn't recognize. The television, the couch, the dining table, gone before Beverly had even filed. My grandmother's writing desk had been listed, but not yet sold. Beverly's assistant found a listing on a Thursday morning, and within 6 hours, Beverly had contacted the listing platform, provided documentation of ownership from Stewart's asset log, and had the listing removed pending the civil proceeding. I got the desk back. It took 4 months and 2 filings and a conversation between Beverly and Priya's attorney that Beverly described afterward as unpleasant for everyone involved. But I got it back. The civil settlement came in October. Brendan's attorney structured it to avoid a full hearing. Restitution for the documented transferred funds plus recovery value on the removed property, 60% of which was recovered in kind and the remainder assigned a replacement value. Priya's separate agreement included a provision that would convert to criminal referral for theft of personal property if violated. The documentation Stewart had built was thorough enough that neither attorney pushed back on its accuracy. I recovered about 83% of the total assessed loss. Beverly told me that was unusually high. I told her I had good records. She said that was an understatement. I repainted the living room in November. I bought a second-hand couch from a woman in Buckhead who was moving to Portland and thought it needed a better home. It's a deep green velvet, and it's the most comfortable thing I've ever sat on, and I bought it alone on a Saturday morning with cash and drove it home in a borrowed truck. I found a writing desk that wasn't my grandmother's, but was the same era and a similar wood, and I put it in the corner of the second bedroom, which is now my home office, with a standing lamp and a filing cabinet and room for exactly one person to work in peace. Within 60 days of the settlement, I had closed 2 new client engagements and opened a third. I was billing more hours out of that second bedroom than I had billed anywhere in the previous year. The room that had been a guest room, the room Priya had used for 4 months, was the room I was doing the best work of my career in. I'll tell you what I've noticed. Having been through this, the people who take from you almost always do it in layers. First, they take the small things, the things you won't notice or won't confront them about because it would create conflict, and you are not someone who wants conflict. Then they take the medium things with slightly less care because by that point they've learned you won't stop them. Then they take the large things, and by that point they have decided you're either not watching or not capable of doing anything about it. They're counting on both. What I've also noticed is that the people who take from you almost never believe you've been watching. They believe, and I have seen this in professional cases and I saw it up close in my own life. They believe that because you didn't say anything, you didn't see anything. They mistake patience for obliviousness. They mistake patience for obliviousness. They mistake preparation for passivity. By the time they're standing in your driveway at 4:40 in the morning thinking they've gotten away clean, they've completely forgotten that you do this for a living. Brendan tried to reach me once more. About 2 months after the settlement, he said he hadn't understood what Priya was really doing until later, and that he was sorry for his part in it, and that he hoped I didn't think he'd planned it from the beginning. I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the Sunday evening and my open laptop and his expression when I walked in. I thought about 11 transfers over 4 months. I thought about 4:40 in the morning and my grandmother's writing desk going into the back of a rented truck. I said, I believe you didn't plan it from the beginning. I'm not sure that changes very much. He said he understood. Maybe he did. Here's what I will say directly. I did not set a trap. That word belongs to the version of this story where I am the one who did something wrong, which is the version Brendan's attorney tried to introduce early in the proceedings. What I did was notice something, document it properly, and protect what was mine before someone else could take it. I did exactly what I would tell any client to do in the same situation. The difference is that this time, the money and the furniture and the writing desk were mine, and the person sitting across the table from my attorney used to sit across from me at the kitchen table and tell me he would never want to be on my bad side. He was right about that. If there is one thing I want to say to the people who are watching this, and I think some of you know exactly what I mean when I say this, it is that protecting yourself is not a betrayal. It is not coldness. It is not a failure of love or loyalty or family or whatever word the people taking from you are currently using to keep you from paying attention. Paying attention is not cruelty. Documentation is not retaliation. And if someone in your life has made you feel that protecting yourself is somehow a wound you've inflicted on them, I want you to sit with that for a minute. Because in my experience, professional and personal, the people who need you unguarded are never the people who deserve your trust. There's a version of this story where I am the villain. I know that because Brendan's attorney tried to tell it. In that version, I set a trap. I surveilled my own husband. I waited in silence and let things get worse on purpose just so I could win. I've thought about that framing a lot, and what I keep coming back to is this. The only people who call documentation a trap are the people who were counting on you not having any. I didn't engineer what happened. Brendan and Priya made every decision themselves. The transfers, the moving truck at 4:40 in the morning, the text Priya sent me like she was closing a door on something she'd already won. I just made sure that when those decisions were made, there was a record. That's not cruelty. That's the difference between being a victim and being a witness to your own life. What I've learned, and I mean really learned, the kind that sits in your chest rather than your head, is that the choices people make when they think no one is watching are the truest information you will ever have about them. Brendan didn't become someone different the morning he helped carry furniture out of a house I paid for. He revealed who he had already decided to be. Priya didn't suddenly become someone who would take what wasn't hers. She had been that person the whole time. I just hadn't been looking directly at it. And that's the part I have to own. Not the legal outcome, not the documentation, not the forensic accountant or Beverly's filings. Those were responses. What I have to sit with is that I saw the early signs and I made the ordinary human choice to explain them away, because the alternative was a truth I wasn't ready for. The resealed mail. The questions about my banking. Brendan's expression when I walked in on a Sunday evening and found my laptop open. I filed all of it under probably nothing, because probably nothing is easier to live with than something is wrong with the person sleeping next to you. The intelligence was always there. The discipline was learning to trust it. What I rebuilt after the settlement wasn't just the furniture or the office in the second bedroom, or the green velvet couch I bought alone on a Saturday. I rebuilt a habit of paying attention to myself, of trusting my own read of a situation even when trusting it is inconvenient, of understanding that protecting what you've earned and protecting your own judgment are not separate things. They are the same act, done consistently, over time. I think about Priya's text sometimes. Good luck figuring out the rest. She sent it at 6:52 in the morning thinking she was closing something. What she was actually doing was handing Beverly Exhibit A. That's what happens when someone mistakes your patience for passivity long enough. They stop being careful. They get sloppy. They send texts. The rest, as it turned out, was already figured out. If you are watching this and something in it felt familiar, not the legal details, but the feeling of watching someone take from you in increments and telling yourself it probably isn't what it looks like, I want you to hear this. Your instincts are data. The discomfort you keep explaining away is trying to tell you something. You don't have to be a forensic accountant to start paying attention. You just have to decide that what's yours is worth the trouble of protecting. It is. I promise you it is.